the world's eyes are on Liverpool right now. They announced that they're going to do citywide mandatory testing of every resident in their city. So this is out of The Guardian. Liverpool to pioneer UK's first attempt at mass COVID testing. So they say in here, logistical help of the army will be deployed in a pilot to see whether mass population screening is feasible across other regions of England. To be successful, it says, it will need not only to find those who are infected regardless of symptoms, but convince them to isolate. Now, Del, I know what you're thinking when you read that. So it took only 8 days for Liverpool, the test city, to spread through other regions, almost 70 of them. So we have the UK Health Secretary, Matt Hancock. He says mass COVID testing scheme adopted in Liverpool would be rolled out across 67 authorities. Now, he claims he wrote to the directors of all the authorities in England. So far, 67 have said they would do it, and he expects a lot more to start doing it. So this is something that it moved very quickly. It started out in Liverpool and then rolls right out. And it also moved quickly in the scope of it and the restrictions put on it. So we have in Liverpool now, just days later, no test, no entry was the headline. How Liverpool's mass testing pilot may offer a glimpse of a future living with coronavirus. And now we get into the big problem is, like you said earlier, the testing accuracy. The first problem is that no one knows just how accurate the new rapid lateral flow tests actually are. So untried are they that they still come with a manufacturer's warning. Negative results do not preclude infection. While the government says it has run laboratory trials and is satisfied with accuracy rates, it has not published any data. So there's a big problem. And now we have
it's just like, I think back to growing up with like Logan's Run and these movies where like these walled in cities and, they're testing, they were doing things like they're testing temperatures or checking a bracelet on your hand. I mean, it's just, it's really amazing. It's amazing. I know I don't have to say it. I know we're all thinking the same thing. But it's really happening, folks. It's really happening. And I love how they have a pilot program, and they don't even get through the pilot program before it just starts spreading around. Like let's not waste any time proving that this was a terrible idea in Liverpool. Let's make sure that we make sure it's a terrible idea across 67 different counties or cities or it's the whole way they do everything. And then we never get an end result, right? All we hear is arguments about whether or not we learned anything from that. All we see is some continued rise in cases. The deaths are going down no matter what these fools are arguing about. And of course, I know last week we were showing some of the protests in Liverpool are extreme. There are cops, there are, all over England. They've had it, right? They are really standing up against this. And as I've said before, these are shots from London, England right now. We're just seconds away from this. We have a presidential candidate that is essentially looks like promising to move in the same direction. I wonder if we're going to handle this much different. Are we all just going to lock down in our basements and say, okay, I guess.
That's a valid,
all right, test me.
Valid question.
We'll see.
Valid question. And in the UK, this is part of their what's called Operation Moonshot. So it's a 100 billion euro program to test everyone regularly in cities, towns, and then across all of England. So
amazing.
What's happening right now, though, is you have the science community standing up. Instead of on the back end here, they're right in the front end saying this is not right. This needs to really be looked at. This needs to be checked out. So there's a BMJ opinion piece. This was written by Angela Raffle. She's a University of Bristol public health consultant, and it's called Screening the Healthy Population for COVID-19 is of Unknown Value, but is still being introduced nationwide. She calls it one of the most unethical proposals of public funds she's ever seen. And then she also says that there's really no information being given to the participants throughout these cities to explain the project, the actual project, what's happening. Is it research? How will this data be used? It's not thorough whatsoever. And another person that came out, this is one of the UK's public health leaders, Alison Pollock. She came out in a public letter, and she wrote it to all the MPs in Liverpool. And she said that basically, quote, "We understand that the Liverpool pilot is likely to use a direct lamp test and a lateral flow assay. Currently, there is little or no evidence of the accuracy of either of these tests for their use in pre-symptomatic and asymptomatic cases or in field settings." And then she goes on to write, this is absolute bombshell. "The false positive rates of these tests have not been established in community use, and neither have the implications for contact tracing services. Evaluations of other similar tests by the WHO has suggested between 1% and 5% of people without infection may get false positive findings. This means that if 1 in 100 people tested in the pilot have asymptomatic infections, as few as 1 in 5 of those getting positive results will actually have COVID-19. And 4 out of 5 would be false positives, and they and their contacts would unnecessarily be told to isolate. Now, that's a big problem.
Wow.
And Alison Pollock, she recently spoke to the BBC, and take a look. This is what she had to say.
We can speak now to Alison Pollock, who's the Professor of Public Health at Newcastle University. Good afternoon to you. You've expressed scepticism about mass testing. Why?
Well, I think the first thing to say is the government has spent £12 billion on a centralised, privatised contact tracing system that doesn't work. These tests, the public have been given misinformation. It is not a test which tells you whether you have infection or whether you're infectious. It simply tells you whether you have bits of the RNA virus. Now, in a place like Liverpool, where the rates of infection are falling dramatically, it's very likely that quite a lot of the population will have evidence of old infection. And that, especially in children, could result in them being isolated unnecessarily and harmfully. The second thing about this test is not only is it not a test that tells you whether you have infection or infectiousness, these tests have not been properly evaluated in community settings. This is a real worry. We do not know whether they work and what they tell us in community settings. And the government's just spent £100 million for Liverpool buying something called Innova tests, which explicitly say they should not be used in community settings. As the WHO and SAGE have said, focus on identifying people with symptoms and isolating them. And they do not recommend mass asymptomatic testing. And we don't know how it's going to integrate into primary care or into public health, and how it's actually going to be effective.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I'm sorry to cut you off there. We're just slightly short on time. Thank you so much. That's Professor Alison Pollock.
Sorry to cut you off there, because we are mainstream news, and this is not information we ever planned on sharing. You went deeper than we want, and we know, though you are absolutely fascinated at how we have a world-renowned scientist saying that this test is total baloney, we need to move on and talk about other things that are going to scare you into compliance. I mean, it's getting so tiring to see this limited moment, what now appears to be the majority of scientists are getting in mainstream media, as this agenda is being pushed by government agents that don't know anything about what they're doing. I mean, I think what we're all staggered by is this accidental? I mean, are they really testing because they think they're going to stop this virus? Do they really think this virus is deadly? Or is it about something else? Are they collecting DNA? What are they actually doing, I think, is what is on our minds. You know, what is happening here? If you like that clip, then be sure to check out our live broadcast of The High Wire every Thursday morning at 11 a.m. Pacific Time. You can watch it on Facebook, iTunes, and Twitter. We'll see you there.